All right, welcome back to another episode. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So Jamie DiNote is our special guest. And could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Uh, okay. I'm Jamie DiNote. I'm a Florida Army National Guard and Army Reserve veteran, a degree in criminal justice, and for the last 6 years, I've been a stay-at-home mom, and last 10 years as an Air Force spouse. Just got back into writing a few years ago and trying to knock that out ever since.
Okay, and now, dear listener and viewer over there on the YouTubes, we get to tell you how we first found him, or her in this case. I actually first found Jamie through her husband when we were talking all things nerd, and he's like, "You have to meet Jamie. She's awesome." And he said lots of nice things about you. It was kind of gushing. I had to tell him to go get a room. You know how that is.
Yeah.
And the rest, as they say, is history. So when he mentioned that this anthology was coming out, this Freehold anthology, I figured, hey, we haven't done any anthology interviews this time around. We used to do that over there at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans, so we decided to give it a try, dust off the old outline. So, because you said you were in the Army, we asked this to all of our military veterans that are also authors. So, how do you think your time in the Big Green Weenie affects the stories you tell?
Um, I don't much like Chris said, it's all about perspective. You can't write anything military sci-fi really unless you understand the people that are in it. So, and the National Guard and reserves have such a people have such a diversity of background and thought and experience that you can't help but draw from that.
Okay, and so with speaking of drawing from that, do you ever draw from people you knew when you were in the Army?
Oh, all the time. Uh, and that, and also people I knew before I went into the Army who later went into the Army.
Okay. Obviously, the names and faces were changed to protect the innocent or not so innocent. You know, standard legal disclaimer.
One of them is actually named after a friend of mine who I swore into the Air Force, but I got her permission to do so.
Oh, there you go. So, do you think your time in the Army affects the stories, how you engage with them as a reader or a consumer of content?
Yes, it would almost have to. It changes the way you think. So I remember reading some military stories before joining, and being able to suspend disbelief and not really knowing any specifics. And then after you get in and you learn better, it both helps create the picture, and it can dispel some of the magic if it's not done right.
All right. Well, now we're going to move right along. And because this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we cannot let you escape without the religion question. So, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Oh. Considering there are only 3 Star Wars, I will say that.
Yeah, it's such a good universe. It's just a shame they didn't do more with it after those 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll come back to it one day.
There's so much potential.
So much. And because we're polytheistic, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or the Potterverse?
I have to go with Lord of the Rings. I may get some hate mail on this one, but I've never seen Game of Thrones, and I'm not a Potter fan.
So I didn't, and I've said this before probably, so the listeners have already heard it, but I've never read or watched the Game of Thrones, mostly because I'm a completionist. So if I don't know a series is going to be ended, I don't know that I want to start it. And obviously I'll give ongoing series a chance, and I might get bitten in the end. Some of these series are 13, 14 books deep, but this one has been sitting at the books they're at for a long time, and it's very obvious the last ones aren't coming out. So I just didn't want to set myself up for that kind of disappointment. So, and I tend to not watch shows about books until I've read the books first. So obviously HBO lost out on my subscriber dollars on that one.
Yeah, I refuse to buy into hype. So
Yeah,
um, by the time Game of Thrones ended, we'd already gotten rid of HBO. So oh
fair
well.
enough. And so today we'll be conducting a brief episode where we're going to dive into the world of anthologies and short stories. We're going to interview an author, in this case, it's Jamie DiNote, about their contribution to the undervalued world of short content. So this time we have the Freehold Defiant anthology on deck. So let's see what this Freehold anthology is about. So I'm going to read you, and I tried this when I interviewed her husband a half hour ago, though you won't hear it back to back. I tried to do this in the movie trailer voice, and even the dog was disappointed. So I'm just going to read it to you. So, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. Everyone has a different war. For some in the UN peacekeeping mission to Granye, the struggle is just to survive. For others, it's to remain sane or keep one's friends and comrades physically and mentally intact. When the rules of engagement are in constant flux and orders are unclear or based on false information, just getting back inside the fence can be an accomplishment. For the rebels of the Freehold of Granea, they must form an organized force from the shattered remnants of their military and from their grimly determined but under-equipped and outnumbered insurgents. Their war is for their very way of life. They'll do anything and everything to stop the invasion using whatever means are available. They mean to make the enemy suffer. And then there's some Latin I can't pronounce. That means because physical wounds heal. And if you want to take a stab at the Latin, I'll let you.
Uh, well, vulnera curari potus,
Sure, we're
maybe.
going with that. She's determined, so it is. So, Jamie, what was your story in this anthology titled?
My story is called Province of Man.
Okay, and can you give us a quick, since this is a quick episode, can you give us the synopsis of this short story?
Very, very quickly, it's what happens when there are no consequences for making the easy wrong decision. Do you do that, or do you still make the hard right?
Okay, and what was the inspiration for your short story?
Um, I've known a lot of people who were in toxic units, and some, they went with the flow. You uh, get by to get along to get by, whatever the phrase is, and they pay for it eventually, either through just not being able to look at themselves or uh, their past actions eventually come to bite them. And then there's others who have refused to play the games and have suffered for it.
Very true. So, does this story? Well, we've mentioned that this fits into the Freehold universe. So, can you give us the Reader's Digest version of it?
Freehold.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, the UN tries to. Let's see. How much swearing can I do in here?
As much as you want.
Okay. Freehold, or the UN, tries to wave their dick around in space, and the freedom-loving rebels of Grania are having absolutely none of that bullshit and will do anything they have to do to protect their home.
You've been talking to Casey Azell too much. All right. So, since this story is military, or this anthology, excuse me, is military sci-fi, is the rest of the universe?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. And speaking of military sci-fi, what is it about that genre that appeals to you?
It's fun. You you get to play with familiar personalities and uh, potentially right some wrongs that you've seen in your own life. Give people the comeuppance that they may not have actually had in real life. Plus, you get to play with big guns.
Big guns are fun. All right. And now we've got some fun ones for the road. We did promise you, dear listener, a short one, and Jamie delivered short. So, if of all the military units in every science fiction franchise out there, which one would you want to serve in and why?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough one. Um, I don't know that I would want to serve in a military sci-fi unit because they all seem to get slaughtered by giant aliens. Um, but if I could work for any fictional unit, it would be Lee Marvin in Dirty Dozen.
We'll allow it. All right. And which unit would you not want to serve in of all the sci-fi franchises out there?
Janeway.
Well, yeah, because she'd have you wander in the desert for 40 years and 40 days.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So as we bring this to a close, can you tell listeners where they can find you?
Eventually, it'll be on Amazon.
Okay, and that'll be linked in the show notes if this goes out before they approve her author page. And if not, we'll go back and update it as soon as they do. So check back or follow the link to the Freehold Defiance anthology. That'll be in the show notes. And you can follow her from there because it should sublink once everything gets approved. Although it's Amazon, so your guess is as good as mine on how long that'll take. And you can follow us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades. Anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades. Our Twitter is SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/blastersandbladespodcast, facebook.com/blastersandbladespodcast. You could support the show at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the show notes, if you choose to do that route, that it's for the podcast. And we'll keep Doc and Nick supplied in all the bourbon they can drink or their liver can take. And I'll be the sober one, so I'll just drink the water so someone can steer this ship. And if you also want to, you can now support us over at Anchor FM. They have a support option much like Patreon. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.